and how Jude talked about them then over near the book of Revelation, and how in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, there's a war in heaven, and suddenly the devil and his angels are cast out of heaven to the earth. And then the statement, it says, woe to you people on earth, the devil has come down to you, knowing he hath but a short time. What's going to happen when the tribulation period gets here? Will there suddenly be an armada of UFOs around the world that'll just blink in from another dimension and then can't blink back out again? They're stuck here. Can you imagine what would happen to the world governments, and how it could see the rise of an antichrist, a Messiah figure to save the world from these creatures? Well, you need to get the book, okay? Call the phone number at the bottom of your screen and order it. It's $14.95 plus shipping and handling. Gary?
Well, JR, I'm fascinated. I've read the book, and again, you have to read it. We'll talk about it today, but I guarantee you there's much more in this book than we have time to cover. Tom, if you were trying to briefly let people know what your thrust was, what your purpose was in writing this book, what was it exactly?
Well, it was that I stumbled upon what I thought was an explanation for something that I had been curious about for a long time, and that was if the Watchers wanted to come down in the days of Jared on Horeb, why didn't they just come down and mate with these women? Why did they have to tinker with the DNA of both the women? Now, of course, my formal and Orthodox education was that this was an attempt to cut off the bloodline of the Messiah, and I still believe that that was true.
Yes.
But what I became intrigued with was, how could this lead to incarnation? Because that was also the story, that these were gods who walked among people. They saw them physically. Now, like today, when we look at ufology, the best, even the best secular writers in ufology, Jacques Vallée, Dr. Jean Keel, Dr. John Mack, all concluded that whatever was going on with alien abduction phenomenon was similar to biblical demonology and to the history of the Watchers, because there is this need to collect, to harvest DNA of humans, but not just humans. You go to bed one night, you wake up the next morning, and Skippy the horse is out in the field with portions of his face that have been removed with laser precision. There's no footprints coming to him or from him.
No blood.
No blood. And it's happened around the world thousands of times, and no law enforcement agency yet has been able to capture the international blood-sucking cult that's doing this to these animals.
Yes.
But these are happening in UFO flap areas, so that there is a phenomenology that occurred not just in ancient times, but almost appears to also be happening now. So this intrigued me. The bottom line, to answer this question about why I thought I had solved the answer, the question of the Watchers and why they had to do this mingling, was the light came on one day that God had created all intelligent forms of life. All of it dated back to Him. And He had kick-started it. And then put up a barrier between the species in order that each kind reproduce after its own kind. So meaning then that at the moment that the sperm of a dog meets ovum of a dog, and a dog zygote is formed, at the earliest moment of life, the spirit of a dog enters that being. The same thing is true of a human, a horse, any other creature, all dating back to the creation of God. Well, according to Enoch, these Watchers had participated with God in creation. They could not speak into existence like he could, but they knew something about genetic manufacturing. And they knew that in order to create a body for themselves to be incarnated in, they had to create something that God had not made. And that by breaching the species barrier, and this is why God had commanded the species barrier not to be broken, they had created something that was neither animal nor man. If it was part dog and part man, the spirit of a dog would not enter into it. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't a man, so the spirit of a man would not enter it. They had made a biological form into which they could incarnate themselves. And then they began procreating, which of course led to the great chaos of the Old Testament. So once I had my mind wrapped around this concept, and I'm trying to explain it in just a few words because I know we have limited time, it really helped me with understanding how what we're doing today in biotechnology may also be opening a gateway now for the return of something that we haven't seen in thousands of years.
Wow. JR, this is fascinating. I have to ask, now we've introduced the word UFO. Do not leave us because we have brought UFO into a Christian conversation. UFOs, call them celestial transportation vehicles. There's biblical evidence that the angels use conveyances. In fact, tell us, Tom, about what you have written concerning angelic technology and the use of technology at that level.
Well, there is a portion of, there was a book just before this called The Ahriman Gate, which was co-written with, my wife wrote it with me. And there is a portion in that book, there's a place in that book where this question is asked: why would angels use flying saucers? I mean,
right.
why? And part of this goes, as you know, to our own Western culture. From the time we're tiny in Sunday school, we have the angels flying around without the use of any kind of equipment.
Like a built-in wings.
Yeah, they have built. But there is a character in the book who makes the case that if you look at creation, you note that everything God ever made had an adaptability and an ability to use technology, that he made them intelligent. Mm-hmm. So whether it's spiders weaving traps or other animals, the things that are invisible are known by the things that we see, the Bible tells us, so that the angels certainly would have had technological knowledge and would have employed it.
And they used it illegally, let's put it this way. In fact, the thrust of Enoch, Genesis speaks about their descent into human form. Peter and Jude speak about it in the New Testament. When they encroached upon planet Earth, they did so illegally.
Right.
Now, the book of Enoch says there are only 200 of them that descended down onto Mount Hermon. I have a feeling that was just the advance team, you know, and then
Yes.
they brought all the rest of them down.
How true.
Until this world was so corrupt, only Noah was still perfect in his generations, the King James Version puts it. I think that means genetically pure, and he and his family were the only ones God could save.
I believe that, yes.
I have seen the head of a beaver that was so large, and I'm talking about a fossil, so large that the beaver had to be 10 feet long. I've seen the head and horns of a buffalo that was 10 times larger than a modern buffalo skull. It was a skull with the horns. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is it possible then that these angels, are these fallen angels, the Nephilim or whatever, were genetically manipulating these animals back before the flood, creating these giants?
Yes.
And that today the pure DNA, that which was saved aboard the ark and is roaming around planet Earth today, is what God originally intended. So they're not so big.
Correct. And this forbidden technology, use that term, might also apply to the kinds of biotechnology, because now we're starting to do again what only the gods of mythology or the fallen angels did. Yeah. And so will this open a Pandora's box? Will this take us back the first time by flood, the next time by fire? And also, even when you follow through Nimrod, Genesis 10, and Nimrod began to be a Gibborim. And many scholars believe that the Gibborim are in the bloodline of the Watchers and the Nephilim, that they are the offspring of the Nephilim. What a fascinating statement. Nimrod began to be a Gibborim. I can tell you that recently
In other words, you can take an adult and change their DNA structure, and through some kind of a virus or nanotechnology, they can go throughout the body and change every single cell to be different from the original.
And we have this record that Nimrod became a rebel. Mm-hmm. At some point, evidently, made decisions. Now, I began to be a diabetic. Mm-hmm. I was making poor choices about eating, working too many hours, not taking care of myself, and I was genetically predisposed to become a diabetic. It didn't mean I would, but it was in my bloodline. Now, think of Nimrod. He began making changes, and he began to become a rebel, a mighty hunter. And suddenly it says in Genesis 10, he began to be a Gibborim. The very next chapter, what does he do? He sets out to build a tower. whose top would reach into Shemayim, the dwelling place of God.